Glad that everyone could join today. We're excited to host you today. On the agenda, we're going to kick off with Magnus sharing a bit about Antler and giving you an overview of what we do at Antler. Magnus is the CEO and founder of Antler. Next, we will go to Rajiv. Rajiv is the partner of our India office. He has experience, training students to be founders. He's made a bunch of investments into student founders. And he'll be talking about his experience seeing students becoming founders. After which we'll be having a panel discussion with Tejas. So Tejas is a 16-year-old founder with Antler. He joined us when he was 16, got an investment from Antler and is building his own company today. So it'll be a session where we're going to have a panel discussion with him and Magnus. Again, everyone is free to ask questions throughout the sessions and we'll answer them as they come. After which we'll be hearing from Lavanya. Lavanya is our scouting partner from the Nordics. She's going to be talking a bit about the traits that great founders have that we observed and what it takes to be a good founder. She'll also be talking briefly about the process we have to take founders into our cohorts globally. And the last session will be held by Anders. So Anders is also our partner across the Nordics. He's going to be going through the basics of building a business. The final wrap-up is going to be held by Magnus. Again, he's going to be talking about our 5-slide challenge and giving you more details on the submission guidelines and the prizes to be won by the winners. Again, feel free to, the sessions are meant to be interactive, so feel free to ask questions throughout the sessions. Over to you, Magnus.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Yash. So I'm going to kick us off. If you have questions throughout the presentation or any of the sections, please just add it in the Q&A box or add it in the chat, and I will try to get to them at the end of each section. So again, thanks a lot all for joining. This is the first Antler Ignite session that we have globally, and we're very excited to hopefully support as many of you as possible to be the great entrepreneurs of the future, solving some of the world's most important problems. And this leads me into Antler's vision. So Antler's vision is to make progress inevitable. We fundamentally believe that the world will only move forward if great people innovate. And we believe, since you've chosen to take now time over the summer to spend a couple of hours learning about building a great business, you're hopefully going to be some of those that help bring civilization forward, solve some of the world's largest problems, and through that builds the giants of the future. So thanks for being part of that mission, and hopefully we can be helpful to achieve that. If you think about Antler and what we do, just to put that out there, we operate now all across the world. We're in 6 continents. We're now actually about to launch our 28th location. We want to work with the very best founders all across the globe in building great businesses from scratch. And we have backed a number of student entrepreneurs. We have even backed people in their teens in building a great business. And hopefully we can be part of backing you sometime in the future in what you want to build. How does the Antler process work? Well, we find great founders. So we don't look for companies. We look for people like you who are just about to get started on building something. And we get more than 110,000 applicants per year now from people like that. We select typically now about the top 3%. And we invite people to come to our office and work with us for 2 to 3 months before we make the first investment into your company. And then we will keep investing in your company as you proceed towards building a really great business. So we also have later stage fund vehicles where we can put more money into your company as you grow and scale that. To go a little bit more into the details of what we do is we really just look for incredible people. We then help validate business models, help with access to other great people that you can work on in building your business, and then help scale and drive that going forward. What are some of the things that we provide? We provide access to more than 1,000 experts all across the globe. access to funding. So we put in our own capital, but we also work with the best venture capital companies across the globe. For the, probably most of you know what those are, but for the ones who don't, it's funds that put money into people who want to build new businesses, so you can hire and train the right people. We have a community of more than 6,000 founders across the globe who are currently building great things. We have a big talent network if you're looking for people to hire. And we have a tech platform where you can access a lot of perks. These are tools that might be helpful in reaching your business targets. This is just part of our advisory network. It's now grown to more than 1,000 people. But if there are specific areas in which you need expertise, we will have that available in our network. I think one thing that is exciting about building new businesses from scratch is, and probably part of the reason why you're here, is you can have a lot of impact on the world by doing so. You can hire people, you can create jobs, you can contribute to the economy becoming much better. You can solve very important problems, for example, within climate change or health or within education. You can also build cool new businesses that makes life more exciting. So there's a tremendous amount of impact in building businesses. I think also for people from all across the globe who are on this call, and we're also very lucky to have supported a very diverse set of founders in Antler. So more than 30% of the founders that we back are women. We want to grow that to 50% over time. We supported people from more than 90 countries. So it doesn't matter what background you come from, if you come from what socioeconomic background you come from, what religion, what country, gender. We just want to support really great people in solving important problems and build great companies around them. These are just some of the founders we've been working with across the globe. This is a really cool drone company we backed out of Stockholm. So why build a company? Well, there are many reasons to do so. You could be driven to really make fundamental shifts happen in the world, like Elon Musk, for example, have done, building SpaceX, which is, changing the frontiers of space and changing the way in which that whole industry operates, bringing down the cost drastically. So now, for many decades, the cost of sending payloads to space was about 10 times as high as SpaceX is now able to do. And through that, we can explore the universe. Or as he did with electric cars and Solar City, moving the world to move from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy solutions. So through that, you can have a huge impact on the world. You can do, like, for the people who are based here in Asia, I brought up these two founders. Since I'm based here in Singapore, Tan Hoi Ling and Anthony Tan built Grab Taxi. It's now, probably one of the biggest employers in the region, creating jobs for hundreds of thousands of people. Also, obviously, for them, in a matter of 10 years, they've gone from, building a company that was worth $2-3 million to now being worth billions. So you can not only have a very positive impact on the region, but you can also create tremendous upside for yourself. If you look at most of the rich lists across the globe, you will see that the top 5 to 10 positions are typically taken by entrepreneurs. So it's not only the impact you can have by building these companies, but you can also create sustainable wealth that you can use to invest into new things or philanthropy or build new businesses. You have Whitney, which I think is another great example. She built Bumble, which is came into an industry that was very mature, and I think it's encouraging that you can almost go into any industry in the world, look at ChatGPT and OpenAI, which probably some of you have used now, and how that's revolutionizing artificial intelligence, which was kind of an area dominated by Google and a few other large operators until a startup came in there and revolutionized everything. So, you know, I would really encourage everyone to take the opportunity to go out there and build. It's a great opportunity to have large impact, move the world forward, create great upside. And on top of that, you get to be your own boss, and you can create your own team and work on what you're very passionate about creating. So I would really encourage everyone on this call who obviously are very interested in building something to do so. Now, why is now a great time to build a company? It's a great time because for the first time ever, we live in a truly global world. We can basically build a company out of anywhere and address customers all across the globe. There are great examples of that. So take Spotify, for example. Probably most of you know about Spotify. It was started by two very young people in Stockholm who decided that the way one bought and listened to music was outdated. So at the time, for the people who can't remember that, you had to buy every single song that you wanted to listen to. And the biggest competitor out there was Apple and iTunes. And if you didn't want to buy through there, you literally had to either download the music illegally, or you had to go and buy a CD. You know, these two people in Stockholm, which is a small town of about 1 million people, took on Apple, which is now the world's most valuable company, and beat them on their core entertainment product. And you can go to any country in the world and you will see examples of this. So the biggest companies in the world today will not be the biggest companies of the world in the future. You will build those companies because the world is now truly global and you can build them out of anywhere. I think the second point I want to make is new technologies are arriving at the scale faster than ever. So basically, for the people who read up on history, if you go thousands of years back in time, human civilization would move forward based on, let's say, the discovery of a new metal or a new way to do farming, and that would affect the world progression for hundreds of years. If you go a few hundred years back in time, a new type of boat, a new type of navigation system could affect and improve the world over decades worth of time. Moving forward to today, you have so many exciting new technologies in terms of artificial intelligence, genome technology, biotechnology, lab-on-a-chip technology, nanotechnology, IoT, and so on, which means that there are so many ways the world is able to improve. And you can utilize these technologies to make almost any industry better. And that's really never happened before. The cost of building a company has also gone down, right? So prior to building Antler, I built this company in Asia called Zalora.com. And when we were building that company, we had to build big warehouses. We were an e-commerce company, so the biggest fashion e-commerce company in Southeast Asia. So we were literally selling clothes. But we had to build big warehouses. We had to build our own logistics networks. We had to hire drivers that would go and deliver these goods for us. We had to build an own payment system because at the time, for example, in Indonesia, I think only 3% of the population had bank cards and credit cards, so they could pay online. 97% had to pay with cash. And lots of other things that we had to build. Now that that infrastructure exists. So for example, if you want to start an e-commerce company today, you can plug into Shopify or other services that means that you can scale very quickly. You can create an app and put it on the App Store and serve the entire globe at the click of a finger. So the cost of building businesses has got down. This leads to very quick disruption. So what that means is it literally means that the largest companies in the world are overtaken faster than ever. So if you became one of the world's 500 largest companies about 50 years ago, you would remain so for 50 years. If you become one of the largest companies today, you will remain so for 12 years. So the opportunity is larger than ever, and there's so many large problems out there to work on solving, and opportunities to create really interesting new businesses. So best time ever to build. So congrats on joining this call from that perspective. Being an entrepreneur, being a founder, it's just going to get more and more exciting as we move forward. So just wanted to set that context. We're going to talk a little bit now about what it takes to be a founder, some examples of great founders, and then some advice on how we can work on moving the world forward. So Yash, any questions that came up while I was talking?
Yeah, there are a few questions. It'd be great if you could answer some of them. So I'll throw a few your way. So one of them is, does Antler invest in all types of companies, or do they focus or look at certain types of businesses, excluding focusing on technology?
So we support all types of businesses. There are some that are really deep tech companies, right? They're new type of cancer medicine, or they're developing wave-based energy solutions for cleaning water, or there are space companies with heavy deep tech components. But we also support people in building, new computer games, building. We have a great company which is building, which is doing sustainable electronics, so literally taking old phones and old computers and reselling them all across the globe. So you can go from very kind of tech-heavy businesses to less tech-heavy businesses. There are a few things we don't invest into, such as gambling and so on. So we have a negative list of things that we don't invest into, as we don't think they have a net positive impact on the world. So we like to back things that make the world slightly better. But apart from that, we have a very broad spectrum of companies that we build.
Got it. And another question I could throw away is what are the disadvantages of owning or starting a business?
I think the long term, there are very few, because you learn a ton, and it's a great opportunity to really have a positive impact on the world and create a great future for yourself and your family. But obviously it's very hard, right? It's something, if you look globally, something like 93% of startups that get started, they fail. So you might have to try once, you might have to try twice. You learn a lot on the way. It's tough. It's very hard work. But once you get through that, you will look back at it as one of the most amazing things you ever done.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Magnus. I think we have a few more questions, but we'll slot them along as time goes on through the session. Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you. And I think we can move over to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Magnus. Thanks for setting the context. I hope I'm audible and you can see my screen. Get to slideshow mode. Okay, awesome. I think it's always fantastic to talk to students, and especially the students and the subset of students that want to become founders, because I think the kind of energy that we have seen across Antler and specifically in India over the last couple of years that we have been actively investing in India has been phenomenal. So what I'm going to cover is a very student's lens to things, which is what does it actually take to move from a student to a venture capital backed founder. Obviously, a lot of faces on this slide are very highly recognizable, even for people who are not from India. The third face here is actually a person by name Ritesh Agarwal, who built a company called Oyo, which is today Decacon. And of course, most of the other faces, whether it's Ivan Spiegel, whether it's Zuckerberg, whether it's Bill Gates, you've seen often and have been the role models. But you must understand one thing, which is these are a very, very small subset of people who became founders. And even the number of founders right after campus was a small one. So I'm going to, before I start and paint the picture of what it takes to become a founder, I'm also going to warn to say that becoming a founder is not for everyone, right? Because I think the journey is filled with a lot of holes. As Magnus said, 90% of people, 90% of companies don't go anywhere. So if you want the set path, if you want the path that needs to, always show a rise one year after another, then the founder journey is probably not for you, right? Which means that probably 95%, probably 99% should not be a founder, at least immediately. And a whole lot of them should probably or would never be a founder. But for those that have that entrepreneurial spirit, for those that want to do something very interesting, and what I am talking about is way beyond the simple example that you would have seen in high school, which is building a lemonade stand, right? I think that's the example that as kids, as school students, you see, which is build your own lemonade stand. Am I someone who always wanted to do that, or am I someone who's going to be taught to do that? And this is a great cartoon that actually talks about, is it really coachable? Is it really learnable? And Antler is an early stage VC. So what is this whole thing about raising money? 90% of or plus of all the companies that get created do not raise venture capital. They are actually what is called bootstrapped. So the first question that you should ask yourself is it about just independence? Is it about really creating something which is an institution which is going to be beyond me? So we made this very simple slide, which is to say, if you really want to be an individual who's going to shine, whether you want to be an influencer or want control of your own time, you don't need to really go build an institution of venture scale. You can do that in a variety of ways. One of those ways being, you create content, you put yourself out there on Instagram, on YouTube, or you be a freelancer where you work on projects with multiple clients. I think all of those are very fair ways to be someone who is individually controlling their time. The second part is when you move from being an individual to actually creating an institution that has 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, without raising venture capital. You do that in a very slow and steady way, but in over a 5-10 year period, you have built a mammoth company. And that's also absolutely fine. There are lots of examples globally. Multiple billion-dollar companies just close home in India. Two big examples, one called Zerodha in the financial trading sector, and one called Zoho in the software as a services sector. These two have never raised venture capital and have gone on to build some great companies, right? So for specific founders who follow path one or path two, I think specific individuals, I think there are lots of stuff that need to be done. But for someone who chooses to go the third route, which is where you raise venture capital from venture capitalists like Antler and other very prominent ones, you have to understand that you're also scaling up extremely fast. You're trying to grow the business 5 times, 10 times a year, which means that you as an individual are going to grow crazily over the next 4, 5, 10 years. You're going to suddenly, from being just a student who's minding their own business, going to be actually building a company that is going to impact millions of people, that's going to employ tens of thousands of people. So if you're going to be ready to do that, and if you think that you want to go that route, then essentially understand that you're going to be probably building, running on a treadmill, which just doesn't have an increasing pace or an increasing elevation. But imagine the treadmill itself is actually, rotating. And at some cases, the treadmill is actually falling and going up again, right? So it's almost like a phenomenally tricky path to take. Now, again, do not do this. And, it's my job to also frighten people, not just paint the rosy picture. Do not do this to earn money, right? There's a variety of other ways that you can do this, do things to earn money. Do not do this to be your own boss, because when you build a venture capital business, you're going to have your investors whom you're answerable to, your customers you're answerable to, the presses you're answerable to, your employees you're answerable to. You actually have multiple other quote unquote bosses. Do not do this for popularity, press coverage. I think there are many other ways that you can do stuff to become popular. Do not do this as a resume point. You're taking money from a venture capitalist, or you're building something for customers. That has to be more than a resume point. And do not do this to have a fancy dropping out of college or dropping out of high school, given all the examples that I showed. But then what do you actually do this for? The session Ignite is supposed to actually encourage people to go do this. So what do you actually do this for? So what we did was we actually asked a bunch of founders as to why and when did you realize that you actually wanted to become a founder. So in Antler India, out of the 40 investments we have done till date, 6 of them have been people who have just graduated or very soon after graduating. One of them, who you'll hear from later on today, is actually still in school, right? So we have 6 investments we have made. So we said, okay, let's go and ask these students as to why they started up and when they realized they wanted to start, right? So the first question was, when did you really know that you wanted to start up? One of the biggest trends that we heard was you really have been wanting to do something, the lemonade stand equivalent, from very early on, pretty much probably in school days. You see something, you are always buzzing with ideas. You want to be part of a club, and you're always inspired by the business side of things. You're always inspired by these entrepreneurs. So if you're someone who's always been inspired by what is happening in the startup ecosystem, what are the ideas, and you're right from late on in school days to your college days, if you always wanted to be building something, then that's a great trigger point to say that, hey, maybe you want to take this route, right? So that's the first thing, which is what might be the trigger point that might actually lead you to become a founder. The second is, what do I learn in high school or in college that actually makes me do this really well? 3 skills that we heard, and I'll talk about a bunch of other things that you can build in yourself in the next slide. One is resourcefulness. You're always, figuring out how to do more with less. Second is you have this raw confidence, which people are, actually wondering, how on earth, is this boy or girl saying such things? They're just so young. How are they taking on such audacious challenges and projects? And you will show that spark of confidence. Third, you are always on the lookout to learn. You're always looking to learn from someone around you. You're always looking to learn how to do something better. And these are 3 skills. Again, not that you have to have all these 3 skills, but you would show sparks of at least 2 of these 3 if you really have the entrepreneurial bent of mind. And again, all of these are questions that you should ask yourself. And the reason why we are stressing a lot is to do some of these self-assessments before you are, taking the 5-slide challenge, or before understanding whether you're ready to pursue this path. The third part, a lot of people have a lot of great ideas, want to do stuff, but they don't end up doing, right? And even a bunch of the students whose photos are here, it took them some time to make this bold call, right? And what were those that actually stopped them from doing? Academics, of course. You are in college, you are in high school, you have to get good grades, and that's something that is expected by your parents, by the ecosystem around. So obviously time there. And one of the things that you'll hear from the founder of Dimension, Tejas, is how is he able to do that while actively pursuing grade 12? Second is failures. One of the things that, especially if you've been a great student in school or college, the thing that it does not teach you is how do you handle failures. Because if you're a good student, then you're always going to be getting good grades, or you're always popular. But entrepreneurship really gets you to the ground. It shows you varieties of failures which you would have never encountered in school or college. So are you mentally ready to handle these failures? It could be a layoff. It could be something not taking off. It could be not being able to raise money. It could be just meaning that you have to shut down your company. A lot of such failures really come at you hard. Third is handling a team. Of course, a lot of you, because you're in college or school, would have never had real work experience beyond some level of internship experience. So how are you going to handle, team dynamics, career, aspirations? How are you going to handle people who are more senior than you? Is something that is very new, and people find that pretty daunting. But thankfully, some of these folks have said that, these are all challenges. Nevertheless, if I'm curious and if I want the confidence to learn, I can actually solve this. So what are the things then that you actually, are looking to learn, or how would you go about this, right? Which is, in your college, if you are able to learn how to build. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go code. It could mean that you're becoming very good at design. It could mean that you're very good at operations and interacting with customers. It could mean that you know how to handle digital campaigns and marketing well. So it's not just about coding and engineering, but it is something that you're going deep into something and wanting to build. Two, you're really good at something that you're doing or a skill that you've learned, which means that you're great at storytelling. You're great at garnering people. You're great at getting money. It could be any horizontal skill. It could be any behavioral skill. It could be any functional skill. You're great at going deep into your specific field of science, right? And that's always something that people look for. Third, there is something different about the way you want to go about something, right? For example, you want to go do something in a way that there's a very different channel of approaching the customer. There's a very different channel of going after distribution. There's a very different marketing thought to something. Something you're passionate about. And this is one point that students should absolutely understand. For example, there's no reason why you have any right to win if you're building, let's say, a SaaS business which is selling to enterprises in the US or enterprises in any market, right? There's nothing wrong in building a SaaS business, but what is your right to win, or why would you know this space more than someone who has spent 10 years in that business? You probably have a much lower probability of raising capital or winning in that space. But something around students as an audience, something around a very new space like gaming or Web3, something around where you are a lot more evolved, let's say in the field of sustainability, in the field of in things that you really believe strongly that you want to build for, and you understand the problem statement, there's a much higher chance that you are actually going to be winning there and building something of value. So pick a space which you're passionate about, because this journey is fraught with ups and downs. And if you're not passionate about something, you're going to give up very soon. Last is you're going to be building, the next 10 years of your life in this space. So why would you build in something where the market size is not small or the sector itself is dying? So pick something where the sector is on the upswing, something where either already tens of millions of users are using something, or where tens or hundreds of millions of users you strongly believe are going to use something. So build in spaces which have large markets. And last but not the least, pick someone that one of the things that at Antler we do, if you're part of our residency, is help you find your co-founders. But some of you might also pick or work with someone that you already have some level of comfort in your campus, and there's nothing right or wrong about it. Just make sure that you're very aligned. It need not be your best friend, just don't start working only with your best friend, because there are people who might be better qualified to build this business than just your best friend or best friends in campus, right? What do you look for in the ideal co-founder? One, make sure you're aligned in the vision on this other person also has the same level of passion on what you're going after. Two, make sure that by values that what is important for them in their life, you two or you three are all very similar. Third, make sure that the skills are some level complementary, because if you're working with someone whose skills are also very similar, then you're not really bringing to the table something that you could do differentially. Fourth, there is as young students, as you get into your adult life in the 20s to 30s, 30s to 40s, there's something very core about your personality types that start setting in. And make sure that, and this is a very nuanced point, which is something that we'll do separately, work with people where the personality styles are additive. Last is make sure that your working styles, at some level, there is appreciation and match. Someone might be a late night person, someone might be an early day person, someone might be extremely comfortable in doing a lot of calls, someone just wants more written communication. And you would be surprised at how some of these things also make a lot of could be a lot of friction points, or could also help align 2 or 3 founders together. And of course, last but not the least, the X factor could be just your shared love for the same football team, or it could be your shared local language, or it could just be the kind of coffee or beer that you like. So you never know what might be that X factor. So these are the different ways that we do believe that you should go about picking your right co-founder. Last but not the least, I will pause here before we get into the panel. And I love Dilbert for all the practical jokes he makes. But this is funnily something around India, and Dimension is actually the company that we are going to be covering next. And Tejas, the founder, who I've been very privileged to work with. And I'll pause here. Yash, we can take any questions specific to either this part or just generally.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And so I'll shoot a couple of questions over to you. So I think you presented a bit about on the attributes we should look out for picking the right co-founder. But we've got a question here of someone asking, what are your views on the need to have a co-founder if the solo founder already has product market fit? And would investors prefer startups with co-founders to solo founders?
So as Antler, we don't have a very specific preference. Of course, the core of what we do is to help you find a co-founder, because as Magnus already started, 90% of startups end up on, unfortunately, on the failure side, right? And this is a very lonely journey, right? It's a 10-year journey. It's a very lonely journey. And you as a founder, you will realize that as you scale up, the loneliness becomes even more so. And that's why we actually encourage people to have co-founders for this journey, because you share a lot with your co-founders in terms of the ups and downs, and it's always extremely useful to have a co-founder, not just for complementary skills, but also sharing this burden, and to be able to, and it's also at some level for the leadership team, it becomes very difficult for one individual to possess all the different skills that you need. What are the different skills you need? You need someone to be a great storyteller. You need someone to be able to pull teams together. You need someone to be an extremely operational focused person. You need someone to be selling. And you need someone to be doing thinking and strategic, brainstorming with people around. Now, one human being having all the skills, almost impossible, right? Which is why we do believe that an ideal combination could have 2 or 3 people, but we have nothing against solo founders. So if you believe that you have early product market fit and you want Antler to be the first institution, absolutely go and pitch to the right geography.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. And I'm going to group a couple of questions here. But the students want to find out the difference or your thoughts on whether they should initially start their careers with like traditional work experience or work experience in a startup versus starting something on their own directly after school. And then how do you think about that?
Again, it's very, while this session is about becoming a founder right after college, but you're best suited to understand what your financial requirements are, right? One of the things that we do at Antler India is to give the Antler Fellowship, and that helps you sort of work out at least the first year's salary. But based on your particular situation, I would say that it is absolutely fine. You go join some level of work experience and then become a founder. And most people actually end up doing that, right? Now, between corporate and between startups, if you are very clear that you want a startup, I would very actively encourage for your first job to be in a startup. Now, whether it's early stage or mid stage, that's absolutely fine, because in corporates, I think it helps you get some level of comfort. It helps you be structured and somewhere be very focused on the process and give you a very nice brand on your resume. But honestly, if you were to ask me, if you are going to be becoming a founder, it just takes away years in your work experience. You would rather go join a mid or a late stage startup or an early stage startup. The kind of learning, the kind of exposure, the kind of, if you do things well, the kind of career growth and career path that you will have will always be better. And you'll also see more ups and downs and the real failures, right? Layoffs are a real reality today across the entire world, right? And before you do one in your own company, I think for you to be part of something or go through that up and down is probably way more worth than a cushy job in a corporate. So I would very actively encourage you to work in a startup if you want to be a founder in the first 5 to 7 years after graduating.
Great. Okay, I'll throw another question, a last question your way, since we've got a few more minutes. How important is founder market fit? Can a founder be a person facing the problem that the startup wants to solve with a different educational background?
It's a great question, and I wish I had I had an answer which fitted your question. But really, honestly, I think the younger you are, the trickier it is for you to have a wide variety of experiences. So founder market fit becomes that much tougher to really measure. I would say just go after something which you are passionate about, the problem statement, because you need to be waking up to that problem statement every day and feel that urge to actually go want to solve it, right? Because if you don't have that kind of urge, when you go through the downs, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to motivate yourself. So we very strongly urge you to be passionate about the problem statement. Beyond that, I don't think you as founders should even think about founder market fit. It's a term that investors use and investors love using. And I would just say that just go after something that you are passionate about, the quote unquote founder market fit. Leave it to us to assess.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Rajiv. It's been great hearing and learning from you. We can move on to the next section. of our sessions. And we'll continue to answer the questions, so keep posting them throughout. The next session is going to be a panel discussion with Tejas, a founder of Antler. So let me just add him as panelist.
He's there. Hey, Tejas.
Yeah.
Hey, Raji.
Let me tell everyone a little bit about Tejas. So we've got the privilege of having Tejas here. He's a 16-year-old founder who's been building this company called Dimension. He's been building software products and communities since the age of 13, which is super impressive. Tejas started his journey in the open source community, and he learned to code at a really young age and build a community of founders, scaling it to an impressive 1 million plus messages just within the first year. Notably, he also became the first underage founded startup to incorporate with Stripe. Currently, he's been working on a new and efficient way to build and deploy software. And he's just one of the great examples of the entrepreneurial talent that Antler supported through its fellowship program in India. And thank you for joining us, and we're happy to ask you some questions and walk through the panel discussion with you. So I'm going to pass it over to Rajiv and Magnus, who will co-host a panel discussion with Tejas. Over to you guys.
Excellent. Rajiv, you want to kick us off? Thanks a lot for joining, Tejas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Sure. I can kick it off. There's some, 1 second.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, there I am.
Awesome. Great, Rajiv.
Awesome. Tejas, great to have you. I think I made a Dilbert joke on Dimension, and I think it's fantastic to see your evolution. And Tejas is building Dimension, which is very focused on developers and developer community, but I'm going to let him cover what he's building. But I think what's been amazing for me around Tejas is just the way he has gone about, just building, and the passion that he has shown. And even the first conversation that I remember from talking to Tejas, a lot of it was about just his passion for building and being able to do it right from school. So Tejas, would love for you to describe your company in your own words and what you're building first.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Awesome. So yeah, just a bit about Dimension, but I think before that, a bit about me, my background and my journey. So I started at the age of 13. I'm currently 17. And through my journey, I've built multiple open source products. I've learned a bunch of languages all the way from Python to Rust. I worked at companies all the way from companies focusing on AI to companies focusing on CI/CD and testing pipelines. And so, and I mean, I've also worked at an internship at a VC fund. So I've basically I've had a pretty big width of work experience in terms of being able to work with incredible people who are building products, as well as people in a different space of venture capital, for example. And so I think one thing that I noticed, and one thing that was super early, I think, like Rajiv also mentioned this, is a lot of people encounter something when they initially start, and that thing just keeps nagging them, and they want to be able to build that eventually. When I started building and deploying products with my friends, I noticed, and this is something I also noticed at companies I worked with, was that we use a lot of different tools to build and deploy software. And unfortunately, when we use so many different tools, there's a fragmentation that happens in terms of the data you have on each of these specific tools. And so the problem that kind of arises is that you have so many tools, and there's constant context switching between these different platforms to be able to find the information, you need to be able to build incredible products. And so this results in poor productivity and disconnected workflows. And so what Dimension does is it unifies the tools that modern teams use into a single platform that makes you faster and better and more productive as an engineering team. So if you're using Vercel for deploying your front ends and AWS for your back ends, Dimension is able to connect all these different tools into a single platform and integrate them really, really well so that your experience is seamless. So that's kind of what we're doing at Dimension. And it was born as this idea of Discord for programmers very, very early on. And it's also, I think, unique in the sense that we're one of the only platforms who's taking an approach of making sure that work is delightful and fun rather than making it something that is corporate feeling. And I think that's also something where we're doing different is we're also allowing teams to bring the tools that they currently use into their current deployment and development workflows, instead of having them move to a different tool like JetBrains Space or Azure DevOps that essentially forces them to move into a different ecosystem of tooling and migrate everything they have today. And so that's kind of what Dimension does, is it unifies the tools that teams use into a single platform and makes teams a lot more productive by connecting the workflows that they have on a daily basis.
Awesome. I'm going to let Magnus ask you a few questions on your origins, because I know those. So I want him to sort of cover your motivation and mindset right at the very start. But when you made this very formal decision to actually pursue entrepreneurship, raise venture capital, build a team, how did people around you react? Especially in the last year of more formally doing it. Your friends, your family, just the people around. Was there skepticism, doubts? What were they saying?
Sure, absolutely. So I think my friends and family have always been supportive of me pursuing something. I think, also by being around people in my school, I know I'm doing something different to what they're doing. And I think everyone has their passion and they decide to pursue it at different stages in their life. I think obviously it takes a little bit more kind of bravery to actually delve into something at this age, because I think again you're also sacrificing to some extent time spent with friends and time spent on studying to focus on kind of what you're really passionate about, right? And so it's not a journey without sacrifices, but I think my dad is a venture capitalist, and obviously when I started off, he said, hey, you're probably going to be wasting your time, but it's going to be a great experience fundraising, right? And he said this kind of thing almost never happens in India, so they're definitely skeptical about me being able to potentially get an amazing institutional kind of institution backing us. But I think again, a part of me is that I'm super arrogant, and so I carried on, irrespective of obviously what my parents said. And I think a big part of it is people might be skeptical, but the kind of there's always an outlier in the venture capital space who is willing to take big risks and willing to see the passion inside you. And so it might be Antler in this case for me, and it could be like so many other funds I'm sure who also want to back young founders who are really passionate about what they're doing. And I'm super grateful that obviously Antler was able to identify that and support me.
Oh, absolutely. A privilege is absolutely ours. How everyone has 24 hours, whether that's you or whether that's Bill Gates. How do you manage your 24 hours, and especially with academics? I'm sure there's pressure both from yourself as well as your parents in terms of the academic pressure also. How do you do this?
Sure. So obviously, having Indian parents, there's a lot of pressure to deliver on grades and everything else. And so I think a big part of what is what is kind of develop my time management skills to be able to do what I'm able to do today is the fact that since early on I've been multitasking a lot. And so it's not just about multitasking. You can be doing 10 different things and you can be doing them all really badly. It's not just about being able to multitask, it's being able to multitask well and manage your time. I think if you're really passionate about something, you will always find the time for it. Whether it's obviously, as I mentioned, is there's always sacrifice. And so, I might have missed, a few hundred hours of studying, right? Maybe that's what happened. But I think one thing that really helps is when you're doing something, just go all in, right? When I'm studying, I want to fully focus on that so I can get it out of the way. And then after that, I can focus on Dimension and I fully focus on that, right? And so, so I think a big part of it is ensuring that you're not constantly context switching during your multitasking process during the day. It's instead just focusing on doing something, getting it out of the way, and then doing the other thing that you really want to do, right? And so I think that's something that's definitely helped is, you really focus. And this is kind of the focus I'm talking about when you have an exam the next day and you need to cram like the entire year's syllabus. Do that, but do it for an hour or two every day and be able to just really focus. And doing that consistently will help you find the time to work on other things. And I think to some extent, of course, I've also procrastinated academics, but I think it's obviously it's important to kind of put a limit to your procrastination and say that, hey, I have to be able to deliver on academics as well as obviously put the time into Dimension. And so I don't want to kind of I want to put in my best efforts to ensuring that I don't compromise any of the things I'm working on and just really kind of lock in on what you're doing for kind of the X time you're spending every day on it, right? So just really focusing on that and not multitasking by, 1 minute I'm doing this, 1 minute I'm doing that. It's instead just saying, hey, I have blocks of time and I really focus on kind of what I want to do on like during those blocks of time. And then, just get as much work as possible done, right? And so I've found that that's very that's been extremely useful for me. One more thing that has adapted me is the fact that, at one point, for kind of to be able to initially bootstrap Dimension, I was working 2 internships at the same time, plus I was doing academics, plus I was scaling my community, right? And so I think when you naturally have high pressure workflows, which I think also like many Indian curriculums kind of put students under a lot of pressure, I think, that's one way in which academics kind of prepare you for the stress levels that you see in companies. It's just about being able to, again, also optimize on the academic choices you make to ensure that you're obviously able to have a good balance between having a strong academic portfolio, but also being able to spend time on doing whatever you're passionate about. So I think, you can find the time if you're really passionate about what you're building, which is, again, why I think, as Rajiv just previously mentioned, you have to really believe in what you're doing and be extremely passionate about the problem you're solving.
Absolutely. One last question from me before I get Magnus in to hear your backstory. What are the other ideas that you see student founders actually going after, especially given their context to life at where you are? Any other examples, any other spaces that you see student founders going after?
Sure. I think a big part of it is definitely, I think like one big reason why kind of younger founders have a different perspective on building products is because obviously, especially in ed tech, right? I've seen many of my friends build ed tech products because of problems that they've faced when trying to learn. I think that's one space that I've definitely seen kind of growing in terms of interest from young people. I've also definitely seen productivity as a space where young people love to work. Because typically, especially for young builders who are building products alongside school and open source stuff, etc. I think it's again it's a space that people are deeply passionate about. I think what makes us unique is that only the next generation of people have insight into what the next generation actually wants. And so I think a big part of that is for example, with Dimension, it's the case of us not making it a corporate experience for building and deploying products, right? It's a fun, joyful, collaborative experience, right? Instead of a more corporate communication atmosphere like Slack, right? And so I think the idea is that the next generation has a level of insight that that unfortunately kind of like the current generation doesn't necessarily have, because of the fact that the current generation obviously can't do what the next generation is doing at that specific point in time, right? And so trends and consumer interests change a lot, and so I think it's super important that that we obviously understand that and build products for the future. And so I think big part of that is essentially ensuring that the next generation, Gen Z, or even younger, kind of we have insight into what's next in the, for example, future of edtech or future of work, etc. So I think that's something that's very unique, and I think edtech is something that a lot of people I've seen really enjoy building in.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Over to you, Magnus.
Thanks a lot, Rajiv, and thanks, Tejas. Obviously, very excited to have back to you, and I hope everyone on the call captured this. I'm just going to repeat it for the people who didn't. So Tejas started building businesses when he was 13 years old, and is now 17, and is backed by really institutional capital. So it's possible to start early. So for anyone who's older than that, you should get going, and for anyone who's younger, you should also get going. Hey, Tejas, there's a few questions that have come in for you, so I'm going to get to those. For everyone who's listening in, if you have specific questions for Tejas, just put Tejas first and then write the question, and I can see them popping up on my screen. But I'm going to start off just by talking about what is so important in the early days. Is what motivated you to take the leap into entrepreneurship? What was kind of the moment that made you make that decision and pursue this early on, which is obviously a tough thing to accomplish?
Absolutely. I think a big kind of part of what drove me into jumping into entrepreneurship is the fact that, since I started my journey, I really wanted to build something, and it's something that's been nagging me for a long time. You know, I mean, I mentioned I had this initial idea of Discord for programmers, right? Which encapsulates a space where people connect the tools that they used to build and have a more joyful, delightful product development experience. And so I think a big part of what drove me into, you know, saying, hey, you know, right now is the time I want to dive into this. It's just the fact that, you know, that's something that kept coming up, and I couldn't really stop thinking about it. And so I think, you know, a big part of what drove me was just the fact that I was really passionate about that idea. And a lot of my friends who I spoke to were also really passionate about what that could look like, right? And so I said, hey, there's no specific reason for me to kind of keep pushing this forward. You know, I have I mean, like, let's jump into it. We'll figure things as we go. And you know, I think again, it's definitely, I mean, I'm really grateful for having an amazing team and amazing backers who believe in me. And I think, you know, it's just, I think one more super important thing is that at this age, like, this is like the age at which we can take the biggest risks. You know, I mean, typically at this stage, we'd have parents who help us kind of fund high school education and potentially some even kind of college education, right? And so we don't really have to worry about kind of keeping up a family or anything as such, right? And so I think a big part of it is that at this stage, you have the freedom and flexibility that you won't really find at other stages in your life. And while there will always be things like academics and work and etc., there will always be, you know, something that's potentially restricting you from, you know, from spending kind of the full 24 hours every single day working on what you really want to work on. I think that, you know, if you're really, really focused and you really love what you're doing, I think there's a lot of capability for you to be able to build incredible things. And so I think, yeah, like, you know, it's there was obviously skepticism from, you know, I mean, 99% of investors I spoke to were saying that, hey, you know, were asking me questions about age and how I can manage this with school, etc. But you know, I think I mean, I was going to do it anyways, irrespective of if I was able to receive VC funding or not. And so I think, you know, having that drive for being able to really, really do something irrespective of the obstacles you face in the way and irrespective of what kind of happens, is kind of what drove me into saying that, hey, I want to do this right now. It doesn't matter how things go. We'll see how things go. We'll figure it out. But, you know, this is it. And I want to do it right now.
Awesome. Great to hear. Great to hear. I like the spirit. Hey, I'm going to take, there's a couple of questions here who are a bit similar from the audience. So I'm just going to jump in and take one of them. So one is around, you know, university. Do you tend to attend university? And if yes, how will you kind of juggle working and studying at the same time? And the other question is, you know, as you started your business, did you find a struggle to handle both your schoolwork and working on this business? I know you talked about that a little bit earlier, but perhaps you can deep dive a little bit how you think around that for the audience here.
Sure, absolutely. I think, you know, as I previously mentioned, in terms of finding it challenging to have both kind of work and school, it's definitely challenging. It's not easy in any way. But I think, again, it's about managing your time. And so if you're able to really focus on kind of like have like a razor sharp focus on what you want to do at that specific kind of block of time, and you really do that, and you kind of obviously be productive during that allocated time you have for whatever task it is. I think that's super important, right? I think, you know, a lot of people kind of have like fancy calendars with you know, I will spend this time to this time working on this. Personally, I haven't really found that working for myself. But, you know, I think like I don't know exactly, to be honest, I don't know exactly how I've done it. I just know that, you know, during the time, kind of like when I need to focus on something, I just put in my best and I try to get that out of the way. And typically, you know, I find myself obviously pulling late nighters and stuff, and that's stuff that every single founder will do. And so you will always make the time in some way or the other. And so I think, yeah, like, you know, I mean, I've been able to do this, and I've still maintained at least like minimum 6 hours of sleep, if not more. And so I think that, you know, again, it's definitely possible. It's just, you know, it obviously it requires you to put in effort into ensuring that you're just really, really concentrated on what you're doing in that time and squeeze in as much as you can. And be as productive during those specific hours that you're deciding to work on. As for the question about university, I think a lot about it depends on you know, the success we currently see with Dimension. You know, obviously, I plan to pursue Dimension kind of irrespective of if I have to go to university or not go to university. It's something that I'm looking for in the long term. It's not something that is short. And if this for example, if our current private beta doesn't end up kind of working out as we wanted to, it's not like it's the end, right? And so I think there's I'm in this for the long run. And so I don't think that even if I have university, I've heard from so many people that university is actually less work than like the last few years of high school. And so I think that this is if anything, if I had to go to university, I could spend even more time on Dimension and find amazing people to build this with as well. So I think it's a win-win situation in both cases. And so yeah, I mean, like, if you time management is definitely a challenge, but if you're able to be kind of efficient with how you manage your time and be productive, I think that it's something that people can overcome. And if you're passionate about something, as I mentioned, you can find the time for it.
Awesome. There's another question here, Tejas, from the audience, from Michael Prima, Angelo Hanapi. I apologize if I mispronounce that name, but so some of the question was around what you already addressed, and then at the end he asks something which I think is important as a founder, and how you think about that is, how do you think about the times when personal doubt comes in, like when you start doubting yourself or doubting decisions in the business? How do you overcome that?
Sure.
As a founder?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think almost every founder I've spoken to faces this. So it's definitely something that is extremely common. I think a big part of it is if you have believers, right? In my case, of course, I have an amazing venture capital fund, as well as other amazing angel investors who believe in me and my vision. And so whenever I question my choices and my decision, obviously, to or doubt, kind of like during times of self-doubt, I just think back to, hey, so many people have believe in me and my vision. And so it's like you have to be doing something, at least a few things right at this point in time, for people to have believe in you, right? And so I think it's about saying that, hey, I might not be perfect, and I think self-doubt is a big part of what keeps founders on their toes, right? I mean, if you have zero self-doubt, you get complacent and you tend to make bad choices. And so I think self-doubt is really important in ensuring that you are making the right decisions and in making sure that you're holding yourself accountable for what you do and thinking your kind of decisions through. But I think it just go back to people who believe in you, your customers who believe in your vision, your backers who believe in your vision. And especially in the early stage, a lot of these amazing people are investing in you, right? So people are, at the end of the day, believing in you. And so I think it's important to say that, hey, people believe in me, and I should believe in myself. And so I should push through, right? And so that's kind of how I've been thinking about it, is, just thinking about the people who believe in me and just going ahead and saying that, hey, they believe in me for a reason. And I just got to continue doing what I do best.
It's great to hear. No, I think you're right. It's definitely something that props out, and how you handle this is insanely important, because you really need to believe, and you can't let big challenges get in the way of
Absolutely
succeeding. Like any great founder has experienced that, right? Elon Musk, he blew up all the rockets and lost all his money before one of them was successful. And at the same time, Tesla was going bankrupt, and they couldn't get a car to the marketplace, and they were 2 years delayed. And sometimes it's not the best founder that wins, actually, but it's the most persistent founder who gets through this moments of doubt. So
yes.
So very good question and great answer. Moving forward, so in terms of kind of building a team, obviously building a team for a founder is one of the hardest things that you do. If you can get great people on board in the early days, whether it's a co-founder or the early hires, it can have a tremendous impact on the trajectory of your business. And when we speak to younger founders like yourself, I think it's even more challenging when you're younger. So how do you think about building a team, and how have you done that in your business?
Sure. I think probably building a team has been the biggest challenge. And I think again, a big part of it is you're asking people to join a company that is in its earliest stage that has like, I mean, at the time it was a 16-year-old founder, right? And so I think a big part of it is I think actually a big part of it is if you speak to people who you want to have on your team, and if they understand you well enough, and if they understand the vision, and if they understand what you've already accomplished, I think the best way to convince people to join your team is by showing them what is by showing them what you've already achieved. And so I think for example, it would be different to obviously kind of get funding post product and product market fit, and it would be different when you just have a bunch of designs, right? And so I think it takes ambitious people to be able to to actually believe in you at the earliest stages, right? Which is why again funds like Antler have such incredible founders and incredible investments. And I think that a big part of what makes it important, and kind of what I look for team members is A, people who are in for the long run. B, people who look for maturity in the founder, not necessarily the age. Age is just a number. And ultimately you can have a 16-year-old with like the maturity of a 10-year-old, or you can have like a 16-year-old with the maturity of a 25-year-old, right? It's not only about the age, it's about the maturity. And so I think a big part of it is essentially working with these people to show them that you're as mature, if not more mature, than a 30-year-old founder, and that the age is just a number. It doesn't mean anything, right? And so I think a big part of it is I also think this like the fact that I'm young is definitely a filter to people who are only looking for to people who just judge people based on their age, right? I think people who are open-minded are the best people who work at a company and a startup. And so I think having a young age is actually also a filter for people who are open-minded, plus people who kind of see maturity. And finally, gaining trust and respect, it takes time, right? And so again, working with them for a few weeks and really allowing them to understand how you work and how you think and how you go about building a product, and your attention to detail and other things that are really important characteristics in a founder, giving them time to understand you, I think is immensely important. And so what we typically do at Dimension is, I give everyone like a 2-week kind of period for them to work with me. And I think that's the best way that people can understand that, hey, this guy is not just like a young person who's just trying something. He's obviously, he understands the space, and I really believe in the vision and the way he thinks we should build our product, right? And so I think that's incredibly important, is ensuring that they have time to understand you. They're open-minded, they're in for the long run, and they also understand that, hey, maturity, it doesn't necessarily correspond with age.
Yeah, I think it's very true. There's another question from the audience, which I think is important to address. So you mentioned earlier, obviously, that your father was an angel investor, and that obviously that he would probably have been supportive of your journey as an entrepreneur. And the question was around whether that's necessary to succeed as a young founder. And from my opinion, I think who your parents are and what they do, sure, they can provide some inspiration, but ultimately building a business really comes down to the individual and the founder. And you have great examples of teenage entrepreneurs coming from any type of background. I built my first business as a teenager, and I grew up on the farm, and you have so many examples of really incredible entrepreneurs coming from all walks of life, all types of countries, all types of backgrounds. So personally, don't think that's necessary, because in the end, you're the one building the business, and not your parents. But obviously, parents can be helpful in providing inspiration, but so can friends, so can Antler, so can books, so can the internet. So that's just my personal view on it, but want to get your take, Tejas.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I think it's obviously immensely helpful that my father is supportive of me in my journey. I think, again, I mean, obviously I'm privileged enough to have a father who I can turn to and get advice on, if we need to make a big decision or if something goes wrong, right? And so I think it's immensely helpful, but I don't think it's a prerequisite. I think, a lot of the knowledge that people have been able to gather from years of running businesses are already available on the internet. And so if you need advice, there are already people over there who are ready to kind of help you out, right? I mean, there's even ChatGPT at this point in time. So you have a lot of different people who are extremely knowledgeable, who can actually help you with your journey. And so I think, a big part of it is again, being arrogant. I think that's something that's super important, at least personally. I think in a founder is, people will say that, hey, this will not work, that will not work. But I think, if you like, you have to be like, you have to stick with kind of your passion and what you really believe in, and you have to be arrogant. Like, you have to be, strong enough to say that, hey, fine, you might think that, but I'm still doing it anyways, right? And so, I think it's about obviously kind of not being extremely arrogant and saying that, hey, I'll not take in any feedback, and I'll not take in any inputs. It's about finding a balance, but staying kind of stuck on your vision. If you know what you're doing, and if you think that what you're building is something that could change the world, you have to stick with it. And I think that's a big quality in a founder, because there are always critics, there are always non-believers, there are always skeptics. And I think, again, that's something that kind of people shouldn't let demotivate them. And so I think, again, even if your parents aren't completely supportive of what you're doing, I think, if you really believe in what you're doing, and if you really kind of are passionate about it, and if you know what you're kind of building, I think honestly, your parents will eventually warm up to you, irrespective of the decision you take. And I think also it's not just about what your parents think, it's about what you think and what you want your experience to be, right? Parents are obviously amazing to guide you through your early stages in life, but I think at this age, you're also almost mature enough to start making your own adult decisions, right? And so I think a big part of it is saying that, hey, my parents have guided me. Obviously, I'll take their inputs, and if they're supportive, that's amazing. If they aren't necessarily, I know what I'm doing, and I want to do it anyways, right? And so I think it's about having that balance, and it's just about understanding that hey, I want to do something, I'll do it anyways. Yeah, it's just about being arrogant about that specific thing, and if you have supportive parents, it's a bonus.
Yeah, that's great. I think great answer. And I know there's actually a couple of parents on the call right now, so be supportive of your kids in building a great business. And if there are people on the call who want to convince your parents to become entrepreneurs, you should ask them to join one of the Antler programs. Good stuff. Hey, we're gonna wrap up this session shortly, Tejas. There's a couple of more questions that I think you can just type up the answer to them when you have time after your session. But I wanted to end with just your advice, having been so successful from an early stage, and obviously have a lot of very well developed thoughts on how to succeed as a founder. What is kind of one piece of advice you'd like to give everyone who's here on the call, who's considering entrepreneurship as a path in the future?
Sure. I think there's a lot of different things I would like to say, but if I had to kind of sum it down into one thing, I think it's staying arrogant and believing in it, and just believing in yourself. I think, again, when I was starting my journey, like my dad's a venture capitalist, and obviously he knows the space way better than I do. And he mentioned that, hey, this thing almost never happens. And so I think a big part of what obviously drove me into saying that I'll do it anyways is the fact that I was arrogant, and I just believed in myself. And so I think, it's important to know that there are always outliers, even in like the venture capital space, or anyone you're talking to, right? There are always outliers. People are completely different. And some VC funds want founders who have obviously kind of come out of super successful jobs, etc. And some funds are willing to say that, hey, I really, really like this person, I see something in them, and I want to be able to support them, right? And so I think a big part of it is understanding that, hey, as much as people might tell you that something might not be possible, it might be cliche, but just keep going. Because in the worst case, you have an amazing learning experience. In the best case, you build something that very few people can. And so I think, believing in yourself, being arrogant, and obviously also, when the time is right, being being kind of introspective and taking in feedback. I think there's a good balance of these qualities that you need throughout your journey, right? And so I think, again, it's about making that balance. But I think if if you're young, many people kind of say that kind of obviously you're young doesn't mean that you have kind of like a good idea of space. I think it's just because you're young, it doesn't mean that there are any limitations. Even kind of obviously I've also gone through legal limitations of incorporating a business, etc. It's all possible. Like, you just got to try really hard. And so I think, don't wait for the best time to start, because there will never be a best time to start. There will always be new commitments, new things. When you really kind of when you think it's the right time, just dive in and start immediately. And I think that obviously things will fall in place through the way. I think one more important thing is that during your journey, you'll always face a lot of obstacles. You will always have a lot of things crashing and burning at the same time, and it might really feel like the end, right? And so I think that when I initially faced these obstacles, I also thought, hey, this is the end, right? But it never is. I've learned that it never is. And this is also something I've faced with doing programming as well. I hit a bug, I can't fix it for the next 3 days. Is this the end of my project? But it never is. And so I think, again, staying persistent, staying arrogant, and just pushing on, I think is probably the one piece of advice I would say is it's never over. And there's always opportunity. There's always ways for you to build incredible things. And so I think just believing in yourself and pushing forward is probably the most important thing.
Excellent, Tejas. That's great insights, and thanks a lot for sharing your incredible journey and incredibly valuable insights. I really hope everyone got inspired by this. It really shows that entrepreneurship, it's not correlated to age, so get going earlier rather than later. And I'm very inspired about your story and how you dared to kind of get started on this and building this, and obviously very excited that we can be a small part of your journey as an investor. So Tejas, why don't you also, there's a few questions that we didn't get to answer. You can see them in the Q&A section. Perhaps try to answer them there, and then perhaps just share your social media or whatever in the chat in case people want to follow what you're doing going forward. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. With that, I'm very excited to welcome Lavanya. Lavanya leads scouting for Antler globally. So what does scouting mean? It literally means finding great founders and then assessing which one of them we're going to bring into our programs and potentially support with capital. So she can talk a lot about what venture capitalists are looking at in terms of what is needed to be a great founder and so on. So with that, Lavanya, please join. Okay, there we are. Excellent.
I'm here. Just give me a second. Sharing my screen. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm looking forward to giving you a little bit more of an understanding of how we discover exceptional talent at Antler. Rajiv and Magnus gave you a good lowdown on how challenging and tricky this path can be. Tejas also reiterated those points with his journey. And I just want to be clear, we're not doing this to talk you out of building a company. We just want to give you a very realistic picture of what it takes, right? It's really not for everyone. But since I lead the scouting function globally at Antler and I am all about outliers, I figured I'd take a slightly different approach and ignite your inner founder if it's there. So I wanted to kick off with our global application numbers. Since inception, we've experienced consistent growth in our numbers globally. It's kind of this really good upward trend we're seeing that really shows, interest in our residencies and our model globally, and that widespread appeal and impact we're making in the global startup ecosystem. It's sort of a slide that humbles us because it also reflects, the trust and confidence that founders from all around the world have in our ability to support and nurture their ventures at the earliest stages. Joining an Antler cohort residency is a full-time commitment, so that decision to take the plunge and all the risks is not something that we take for granted. And although, of course, we're super proud of all these achievements, we're very eager to push the boundaries even further. And this, I just realized I didn't update this slide. And actually, interestingly, we're almost on par with our 2022 numbers, and it's only July right now. So we're really sort of, getting there in terms of spreading ourselves all around. Let's probably also explore some of the key traits, of what we look for in founders, as Magnus pointed out, right? Like, what do we look for? What sets these people apart? And it's pretty clear to us, there are like a couple of traits in particular. Tejas also talked quite a bit about this. Very highly aspirational, super visionary with the way they think, very big picture, connecting ideas and forming this like holistic vision. Most people think they're absolutely crazy when they come up with ideas, and no one's going to be able to do that or pull that off. And it's those ideas really that have sort of shaped the way things are today. Execution is a core strength, maintaining like this relentless cadence, consistent action, overcoming obstacles, and like just delivering, time and time again, just very quickly and agile in terms of how they turn ideas into something tangible, and adapting strategies based on feedback. They also have a very typically very steep growth trajectory. So they're constantly like kind of pushing boundaries, and very creative in the way they sort of problem solve and sort of prioritize, kind of where they would spend their time and things like that. And then also a very clear one is ability to track other people into their journey in the very early days, right? And that just doesn't just include investors, but also team members. Because getting people to join your early journey when it's just an idea is tough. But having said that, we recognize at Antler that there's no one size fits all founders. People always ask me like, oh, what do you look for at Antler? There's literally no one size fits all. We know and we understand that, all these diverse characteristics, founders come to us with like very unique abilities. They embody very different traits. There's no like, typical trait of one or the other, but I would say one of the top things that they all have in common, and the people that we've invested in have a lot of spike in terms of their grit to do this, right? It's only during the residencies that we actually see everything come together. And it's because we spend this time together with the founders that we really can see all of this come into action. Like, people can talk and tell us things during the interviews, but it's also really important for us to spend time with our founders. And this is where we make that decision whether we invest in them or not. And I feel like to really illustrate these points, I would probably try to tell it through stories that you would be familiar with. 3 groundbreaking companies, Stripe, Bumble, and Snapchat. These were all tech pioneers, right? All under 25 when they started building their companies. So just like Tejas, they never they never gave up, really. They just transform industries. They redefine the way we connect, the way we create lasting relationships, the way businesses make payments, and how we share memories. And it all started with founders who just had these like bold visions to change the course of how we interact. I would say a little bit, like, I'll just pick a little bit on each of their stories here. Like, the Collison brothers, they grew up, they're youngest self-made billionaires. They grew up in a small town in Ireland, and then they moved to the US to study. Both John and Patrick had dropped out of MIT and Harvard to pursue these entrepreneurial dreams. And it really just kind of like showcased a lot of clear conviction in the idea and conviction in wanting to solve this problem. They had a lot of, I would say they spent a lot of time really kind of, doubling down and understanding like what would be unique to their problem, what would be unique in the way they would do this, and how they would take down the huge players that were already there. And one of the main areas that they doubled down on was just like focusing on the developers. They revolutionized the online payment industry with simple developer-friendly APIs. And then it just made it easier for businesses to accept payments, on websites and apps and all of that. And they focused on catering to developers and then simplifying that entire process, but it also earned them a huge community of users. So it just really teaches you, like, as young entrepreneurs, the significance of understanding your target audience and figuring out like, ways and levers in terms of like how you would penetrate like already crowded marketplaces, right? And then I would say also this story really illustrates, their passion, innovation, their strong sense of purpose. They were very big about, they were very vocal advocates for like diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. And they really actively supported a lot of underrepresented founders. They invested in a lot of initiatives that promote promoted all of that. So it was like a really big, like early journey for them that, you know, they had fun building this company, but at the same time, they also were very purpose driven. And it's super inspiring because it really shows that, you know, age is no barrier. I mean, they were like 19 and 22 when they started this, right? And then we have the Bumble story, which is was told a little bit earlier by Magnus as well. And, you know, Winnie Wolf is one of my favorite stories, I would say. It was already a very crowded marketplace when she founded Bumble. She herself was an early co-founder of Tinder, or was early days at Tinder. And then she left to build Bumble with a strong focus and taking a very different approach from what she learned at Tinder. And instead, she decided to empower women in the online dating world, and then just challenged like a lot of gender norms and build a whole strong community around this. Also became the youngest female CEO to take a company public. And you know, she just did a lot of things with like her community in mind, had a very playful, like the branding was really like playful and meaningful. Everything was about like, you know, being kind, being bold. I just realized that I have the wrong logos on these two slides. Okay, so that's supposed to be the Bumble logo, not the Snapchat logo. But anyways, yeah, she attracted millions of users in the early days. Just, you know, this widespread appeal and unique approach to online dating just kind of like spoke to many people. They were just looking for that change. And I think the story tells us a lot about the, you know, the whole having a vision, standing for like meaningful values. I mean, I won't go into the details, but let's just say her experience at Tinder really shaped a large part of her resilience and determination to persevere through all those difficulties, right? Like she literally didn't give up, and she went ham and did this whole thing and started Bumble. And then we have Snapchat, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. The concept started when the three co-founders were at Stanford together. This whole disappearing messages thing, people thought it was like really weird when they first started. But you know, the first thing they thought about was just kind of like, let's just revolutionize the way we're communicating. Like the first Snapchat that was ever sent was a photo of Evan Spiegel's foot with a message test that he sent to Bobby Murphy. And it was just like this exchange actually led the foundation of what eventually became Snapchat today. Like they were just having fun playing around. And then Evan Spiegel also had, before this whole tech and entrepreneurship thing, he had studied product design for a bit. So it kind of shaped a lot of that user-centric design approach that they had at Snapchat. It was kind of like a big part of their success. And just really like, you know, they revolutionized content, right? Because one of the things that they said they were going to do was kind of like think differently. They decided to do all these like fun filters and all of those things, which became like a very playful and creative way to express yourself, which now many other social media channels have adapted as well. And they've had a huge impact on the way we communicate, you know, being authentic and this whole real-time interaction thing. So yeah, it really just tells a story about like innovation, creativity, and like perspective, and how these things can create like a global sensation. And I hope you find inspiration in stories like this, right? Like these examples, what they have in common with, you know, what we've talked about prior to this, and what Tejas definitely embodied on his journey, is that all of this stemmed from just sheer passion, having fun, falling in love with a problem, and just having the conviction to build like there was no tomorrow. And I guess I think, you know, a little bit about how that story might, you know, be for yourself, and you really have to dig deep and see if you have it in you. But if you do, and then this is something that we encourage you to do. And on that note, I guess you want to know a little bit of how, you know, we select founders at Antler. So let me take you a little bit through our approach. This is kind of what we do at Antler with regards to our residency. So just to be clear, this is for the typical Antler residencies that we have across like all the 26 cities we're present in today. I've simplified this quite a fair bit just to, you know, keep in mind the conversations we have with the applicants are where we weigh most of our decisions on. And it's a pretty rigorous and data-driven process where we select candidates. So I'll just walk you through that real quick. So first we have the application stage, where we have applicants provide their motivation for joining, submitting their LinkedIn or CVs. You know, it's a very initial step where we just kind of get very easy, clear insights like right away. And then we have a validation call, which is just a brief call that allows us to verify and confirm, you know, whether they meet our criteria and have the potential to like sort of thrive in our programs or residencies. And then we have the drive interview, which is conducted by an Antler scouting team member, where we assess their skills, mindset, compatibility. We talk a lot about like your story, your upbringing, things like that. It's like very personal, and we try to get to know our founders prospects in a very short amount of time. And then we do the partner interview, which focuses a lot on your areas of interest, where you might have problems that you think are worth solving. We talk about that during this time. And then we validate our decision further by gathering, some references and things like that. And then we give someone an offer. The final decision is made, taking into account all the insights that we gathered throughout the process. And ultimately, we make our decision on inviting someone into a cohort, but it's actually the 3 months that we spend with people where we decide to make an investment in them. And it's those 3 months that really matter the most to us, because that's when, it's not where we see whether you really like walk the talk. And to piece all that together, just want to emphasize, the sort of like human side of all of this. So these are this is just some quick like learnings and something I wanted to also just kind of share to emphasize how we focus on the human side of things when we make investment decisions, right? Just to give you some examples of like what would happen if investors didn't do that. So imagine if we solely focus on ideas that seem conventional, very like safe, or that we knew enough about, right? We would risk missing out on the biggest outliers and game changers in the startup world. Like some of the big successes that we know about, and you are familiar with all these logos, often look improbable at their founding. You just take a moment to look at some of these companies. Instagram started as a simple check-in app, YouTube as a dating site. Slack was initially a game studio. Twitter was a podcast platform. Twitch was like a platform for reality TV streaming. So these examples just really highlight the importance of looking beyond the surface, right? As investors, we also need to remember to embrace this visionary founders with very out there ideas. Like these are the outliers. And some investors specialize in predicting the next technological change within a specific industry. But at Antler, we take a very different approach, as we've outlined earlier. We invest across multiple industries, geographies. We recognize that the next big breakthrough can literally come from anywhere. And so our focus is not on predicting the future, but our focus is on investing in founders who are experts in their fields. And when we think about this, we always, we remind ourselves to constantly be humble and acknowledge that, people possess greater knowledge and insights than we do. Our job is to believe in them. Our job is to support them when we believe in them and spend time with them. This is much easier to do because then you actually really see all the pieces come together. But we position ourselves for success even when, the path is not very clear usually, because we invest in such an early stage at Antler. And we understand that the journey from a very unconventional idea, into something that's very tangible is filled with twists, turns, pivots, you name it. But that's why we have to remain very open-minded. We embrace a lot of the differences, all the what ifs and the maybes and the uniqueness of these individuals, even if things don't fit the traditional mold. And that's something I'm really proud about, because I think that's so important for being in the stage that we are at Antler, when we believe and make all our investment decisions on individuals and teams. So I think that's a really important part to also stress. And then kind of like round this up, I thought I'd leave you with some powerful and actionable takeaways as you embark on shaping your journey ahead. Whether you aspire to co-found a company or play a part in someone else's vision, right? Like that's totally cool too. I hope these tips will help you on that journey. And just to emphasize, it's not for everyone, right? And that's perfectly okay. We can all make a meaningful impact in various ways. Like currently, I choose to make that impact by being an investor. And I think it's so much fun to do it this way. But, that journey might be there for me in the future. So, if this part feels right to you, don't wait till you've accumulated tons of experience. Take the risk, embrace the challenges, venture forward. It might not lead to immediate success. Like in Teja's case, he started at 13 and now he's building a different company. If it doesn't lead to immediate success, just remember that failing fast can be, one of the greatest lessons that you'll have, and just learn to embrace that journey. Like actually failing much early in life is so much better and more rewarding for your future journey. So a couple of examples, like, things that you could kind of think about is already, seeking real world experience. Don't just read about stuff and like theory based, like go and experience it, right? Like essentially go, like Tejas talked about as well, go get internships, part-time jobs, opportunities in the industry that you're interested in. Real world experience will like really help you understand the practical side of things, right? And I like to also remind people, like, travel as much as you can and see the world, gain different perspectives if you're able to. identify, solve problems, train yourself to start spotting problems in everyday, just having like little exercises, like everyday problems, try to solve those problems and see like the inefficiencies around you, and like try to brainstorm on possible innovative solutions. Prototype, testing ideas, you don't have to wait till it's perfect. Believe in like the whole, MVP, testing things out, gathering feedback, and refine that based on real world feedback, right? Not a focus group of people that are supporters. And then seek a lot of feedback and iterate, like be very open to getting feedback. I think this is so important because sometimes, you might go off on a tangent and just feel like you have figured it all out. But I think it's very good to have people question you, because it's in those questions that you either build conviction in why you're doing what you're doing, or you pivot. And then practice time management, I think, is a really big one. I think, if you're starting like at a young age and you haven't had a lot of work experience, you should try to focus a lot on developing like effective time management skills so that you can balance all the things you need to do. And then building and curating like a supportive community, surround yourself with people, filter your friend groups, like make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are going to challenge and grow you. As I said, failure is such an important thing, so embrace that as a learning opportunity. And then staying adaptable to like the changes, right? Like if you're working on something right now and then there's a trend that changes and that kind of puts that out, move on, pivot to the next thing, right? So markets change rapidly. You have to stay agile and adaptable. That's the name of the game. And then I also think it's super important, as much as possible, try to develop, sales and negotiation skills, like whether you're selling a product, negotiating deals, these kind of things will come in super handy in your journey, so that, you can always take care of your needs and make sure that you're not, your negotiation power is strong. And then another one that I think is really, really important is also cultivating emotional intelligence. Entrepreneurship involves dealing with all kinds of people. So, you need to learn to understand and connect with people in a way that is probably different from what you're used to. So just try to like expose yourself more to that. That's also why I always recommend traveling, because it's such a great way to just force that exposure. And then staying committed to your vision, right? Be super, super committed to the long-term vision. It's ups and downs and twists and turns, but your commitment is what's going to help you and drive you forward. So that's super big. But yeah, and then I guess final words. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, I encourage you to embrace all the discomforts. At Antler, we always talk about being uncomfortably ambitious. Take risks, dare to color outside the lines. Don't let anyone or anything hold you back. Let your unique background experience be like that driving force behind your determination. Setbacks are just stepping stones. Embrace, being open to the new perspectives and things like that. And yeah, just like Tejas clearly outlined, just believing in yourself and your abilities. It's that's going to take you to the next level. So as you embark on your own ventures and things like that, remember that your passion and purpose will be your guiding force, and that you need to continuously stick to that. And yeah, don't let the naysayers steer your ship. Dream big, be bold, make your mark in the world. But yeah, so with that, I guess I wish you all the best for your journey ahead, and I really do hope that we'll be seeing applications from you in the near future at Antler. I will hand back to Yash.
Thank you, Lavanya. And we've got a whole bunch of questions, but we're running a little over time, so I'll maybe shoot one your way.
Okay.
So there have been a couple of people asking about the difference in skill sets in being a founder versus being a venture capital investor. And do you think being a founder first helps in becoming a good venture capital investor?
Yeah, I definitely think, these are my opinions, of course, but I definitely think having some experience in the startup world prior to being an investor is so much more valuable. I personally haven't founded my own company, but I was early stage. I was a hired early stage venture-backed startup. And that journey has been instrumental in helping me understand the importance of why a co-founding team is the core of everything, because that startup failed. And I learned a very powerful lesson in that journey that helps me become a better investor and reminds me day in, day out how important the team element is, because we had product market fit in that journey, but we didn't have the right co-founding team. And that was a powerful lesson for me as well. So yeah, I 100% believe that if you want to be in VC, I think today you should definitely have some kind of founder experience. You don't have to be a co-founder, but have had early stage experience in a startup for sure.
Awesome. And I guess another technical question just came in. So if a person's startup fails with Antler, would from a scouting perspective, we consider that founder again?
Hell yes, we believe in, like, that happens. That has happened. People have tried to build a company, and then things change and stuff like that. We've always had our door open to listen and to repitch and things like that. I really don't think there's a one size fits all answer for these things. We're super agile at Antler, so I just want to encourage you to continuously challenge us. I actually say this, and it sounds like I'm saying this for the sake of it, but I love being wrong. I love when founders actually challenge me and tell me, you know what, I'm going to go out there and show you guys, you should have invested in me, and those kind of things. So failure, or if we decided not to invest, it's just one door closing and others opening. And I really, really want to encourage you to think of this journey as a very agile one.
Awesome. Thanks for your time. And then we can move on now to Anders' section. So in the next section, Anders is going to be talking about the basics of building a business. So over to you, Anders.
Thanks a lot, Yash, and thanks a lot for letting me join this session. Super exciting to be part of this group. My name is Anders Hammerbeck. I'm a partner with Antler, based out of Stockholm, and I've been part of this journey for about 5 years, almost since we started. So I hope you can see my screen all right. Yash, can you confirm if things look fine?
Yeah, that's it.
Sounds great. Okay, thanks a lot. So now I think the last session of today, we're going to be talking even in more detail about building your business with Antler. How does it work? What do we do to support founders? And some of our best learnings along the way here over the past 5 years. First, before that, so this really comes close to heart for me, because as a high school student in Sweden, I started my first company. It was an IT education company, trying to really disrupt the Swedish education system using digital resources. Was studying at the same time, parallel class to Daniel Ek, who then went on to found Spotify and so forth. So I really see the great benefits and merits of starting your company early. For us, we ran for a few years parallel to both the high school and university. And then we sold the assets, and some of our people went on to work for the acquiring company. So it was a great learning experience for myself. And then went on to work for McKinsey a few years, and then came back to the startup and scale-up world with a few companies. So trying to build some of these lessons in, as well as what we've learned at Antler. So over the next, let's say 15 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about some of the essentials of building a successful startup company with or without Antler. So what does it take to build a company? From the previous speakers, Lavanya, Magnus, Rajiv, etc., we learned that an exceptional team is really at the heart of things. An exceptional team that is diverse, that is strong, full of grit, that is executing extremely fast. That's the most important thing, and I fully agree. But my question is that enough to succeed? And my answer to my own question is it's not enough, actually. It's really helpful to do a few things more in addition to that, and to consider the problem, the solution, validating number one, number two, and then also packing in a good business model to your business, and then considering the fundraising elements to make sure you have the resources to scale and to grow your companies. And we see many serial entrepreneurs and second and third time founders learning this from their first venture. So why not learn that before you start your company as well, and to share some of the lessons. And of course, we spent weeks and months talking about these things in our cohorts and residency. So this is really going to be a quick snapshot into some of these areas, and I'll try to unpack some of the most important lessons in a very brief amount of time. But hopefully it will inspire you and give you something to take away as you build your own companies here in the future. Let's kick off with the problem. So on the problem side, we think it's very important to start with the problem in mind, to be very obsessed or passionate about solving a certain problem, rather than starting with the solution and then looking for a problem to attach it to. So this is key. And why is that key? Well, if you fail with the first solution, you will likely move on to build a second, a third, and a fourth solution to that problem. Therefore, someone who's obsessed with the problem is a strong founder, in our opinion. Then what is a good problem to solve? Well, these are some of the attributes that you can consider Is it painful? Does it really hurt currently? Is it popular? Many people experience it. How frequently do they feel it? Is it every day, every week, or only once a lifetime? Of course, this goes for both business to business and business to consumer type of problems. Is it urgent? Does it need to be solved now, or can it wait? And I think one of the most important things, is it growing or is it shrinking as a problem overall? That speaks to the mega trends and the sort of globalized trends that we see. So these are some characteristics of problems to solve. Bigger problems like climate change, the education system, the healthcare systems of the world, and access to capital and financing and so forth are some of the mega areas that are exciting. And of course, going deeper into those will help you find big problems to solve. But oftentimes, founders have experienced these problems themselves or worked in companies who've seen these problems. And this is a very good starting point as well, to understand it from firsthand experience. And then after the problem comes, of course, the solution. What to think about here? Well, there's so many things you can start with as a company, but your resources are always constrained. So be as lean as you can, build a minimum viable product, a small version of your final product that still works, that allows you to learn a lot, test a lot, and to build those lessons into your iteration, to change around a lot. This is super key, to not to start too broad in the beginning and build and build and build for 3 years, and then have a super nice product that you launch, which then might not be anymore what the customer is looking for, and you waste a lot of resources. So when it comes to solutions, there are, of course, mega trends. Lavanya touched upon this as well, to be observant of those trends, to make sure that you have those big trends in your back to really help you. If you're a surfer, you want to ride on the wave. You don't want to be running a marathon with wind in your face. You want to have it in your back. And there are consumer trends, of course, that are massive: online shopping, work, flexible remote work, sustainability, longevity of life, and so forth. Technological trends such as generative AI, we see a lot of today. Hydrogen power, quantum computing, someone asked about that. We love those sort of deep tech problems as well. Electrification of all types of vehicles, precision medicine, AR, VR, XR, and so forth. Big market trends, cybersecurity, cyber warfare, cyber threats are becoming more prevalent than they used to. Everything as a service as opposed to buying something or owning something. Workplace productivity enhancements, for example, using AI and others, and sharing economy across all fields are big market trends that will continue sweeping. Regulation trends, regulatory things happening as well. Open banking, open healthcare, privacy laws changing, hopefully to the benefit of consumers, data protection, trade barriers, so on and so forth. Massive trends are happening. Consider these and make sure that you can build them into your company and build on top of them. But also be aware, even better than finding existing trends that are here, finding the future trends of the world that might not have started yet, that you're the first to see. And if you can take a contrarian perspective and be right about that, and that's something that will become a mega trend, and you can get funding now, that's of course the best, because then you're really ahead of your game. On the solution still, focus, 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 and then expand. Don't try to build an alphabet at the first stage, but rather remember Google's first window was just a white web page with one text box, search box, and then they added all kinds of auxiliary services and monetization, and are today one of the biggest companies of the world. But starting as a focus company really, really makes sense. Good, let's keep moving on here. We talked about the problem. Starting with the problem, finding a big one that is growing. We talked about the solution, some considerations on the solution, of course, we could talk more about that. And then validation. Validation is really looking at number one, problem, and two, solution, and to validate that you're on the right track here. At the early stage, you probably have clear hypotheses on what is the problem and what is the solution to that problem. But how can you validate that without investing massive amounts of your own time, your most precious resource, and yours and your investors' money? Well, that's where validation comes in. You likely want to see who's the initial target customers, so you can shape the product accordingly. How are you going to acquire customers and at what cost? what's your initial proposition, i.e. the features and the aspects of your product, and what's the willingness to pay from your clients or consumers. Those are some considerations. And on the right here, you can see some methods of validating without spending lots of resources and money, but still getting lots of useful resources and learnings back from your potential customers. And there are a lot of ways to do this. And we talked a lot about this in our residencies, and really encourage founders and startups to go out and get letters of intents, getting activities, signups, verbal statements of commitment, and so on and so forth, to really show the founders and the teams that they're on the right track, and help them, tweak and iterate so that they're on the right track early. And then building a product that really matches that validation. This helps. And of course, if you can get revenues early on, you might be spot on from the get-go. That's always the best. Good. So after validation, talking about the business model. So we've had a couple of crazy years here in the VC and investment space, but in the past 1 or so year, things are coming back to somewhat normal. The focus on revenue growth, the focus on profitability, unit economics, and other type of business metrics are again really, really important. So I think as a startup, if you set out to start, this is always important to think about the business aspects of your company and how you can sort of optimize for those from day zero even. A few concepts, really back to basics. And I think for most of you, this is probably obvious, but I mentioned them still. Looking at, the future profit of your company. How are the income going to be higher than the cost of your business? Modeling these out, in a simple way. Doesn't have to be too complicated in the beginning, but at least consider how the profits, will come from. The second part of this, LTV over CAC, that's talking about a concept called unit economics, breaking down the business aspect into one unit of transaction or customer or product. Looking at, let's take the customer example, acquiring one customer. What's the cost of acquiring that customer, the so-called CAC, or the customer acquisition cost? And what's the profitability or the long lifetime value going to come from that customer? How's that going to be? Which is the contribution margin times the number of months of tenure with your company. And then we basically compare, is this customer or client profitable? If not, what can we do to make that the case? The last concept here is the runway of the company. How can you make sure that you have the resources to keep growing? The runway is often measured as the number of months of operations without adding additional funding to your company. So the longer runway, in some ways, the better, because you can keep growing without having to fundraise again. Good. So of course, we spend more time on this, working with founders and developing hypotheses and financial plans and so forth. But these are some of the kind of key concepts that I think are good to always keep in mind as a startup founder. The last point I wanted to touch upon here is the fundraising aspect. Coming back from the previous topic about profitability, if you're profitable from day one, which most companies aren't, you won't have to fundraise that much. But to really grow fast, you're likely to want to have some external funding to fuel that growth of your company. And that's where VCs and angel investors and other type of investors come into play. Fundraising is both an art and a science. And these are 5 of the lessons that we've learned, that we've seen, and that we've sort of advise startup founders to do. And I think there's no one set cookie-cutter solution here, but founders really should draw on their own personalities and strengths when fundraising. I've personally seen tech founders, showcasing demos in an excellent way, opening up the code base, and by doing so, being able to fundraise great amounts of capital due to their technical savvy. But I've also seen business type founders who are really going through the financial calculations, who are onboarding new customers, and show their savvy in selling the company, selling the products that are able to fundraise. So it's really different ways of doing this. But one thing that is sometimes tricky is to both keep in mind the short term, what you're building here and now, and the short term traction. How many customers did we get this week and month? But also keep in mind the long term ambition. Again, back to Lavania's previous session about talking about keeping the long term vision in mind. Point number 2, building a story deck that really summarizes what the company is doing and the underlying growth plan as well. You know, what's the ambition in 5 years from now? That sort of translates also to how much cash will you need from external investors and what are you going to use it for? Number 3, reading up if it's your first fundraising rodeo, reading up on the fundraising terms and conditions and how this really works, or have a good advisor that can help you with that, because it's really a lot of new lingo and concepts for founders doing it the first time. This is something we, of course, help our portfolio companies with along their journeys. Point 4, meeting the right investors. One investor can be right for one company, but wrong for another company. Investors have thesis, they have focus areas and so forth. And making sure that you match your company to the right investors is really key. And getting warm intros to those investors also help from other founders or from other investors or people who know those investors well, to have someone really standing up and saying, this person is a great founder. Point number 5, developing your closing ability. You might have had a lot of first meetings, but when that's the case, how do you bring this to a term sheet, which can then be turned into investment? Work with, FOMO, fear of missing out, keep things structured, make sure you talk to several investors as well. And then you'll be able to close good investments. But of course, none of this replaces having a great startup to start with, a company that really solves a big problem, has a good solution, and works in the ways that we talked about today. So that's at the heart. And then in addition to that, those are some fundraising fundamentals. Good. So we've quickly now covered why it's important to focus on the problem and not the solution. When looking at the solution, being focused, iterating quickly, and really taking things step by step. Validating, point 1, and number 2. Point 4, business model. How can you build this into your company and think about this early on and not have it as something that you add later. And point 5, the importance of fundraising and really paying close attention to this. Read somewhere that startup founders spend 30-40% of their time fundraising, which is a lot of time. So of course, better if you can limit this to lower number, to focus more on really building your product, selling your product, and building your team, of course. But fundraising is essential. So these are some of the 5 areas that we spend a lot of time with at Antler, also supporting our founders during their residencies and when they become portfolio companies. And I think, if you have any questions, feel free to raise them up now or come back later. And I'm happy to connect with any of you and answer to the best of my abilities. But this has been great. I think, as been said many times, 90% plus of startups fail. But I think, having the right grit and thinking about some of these things will definitely set you apart and improve your odds of succeeding with solving the big problems that you look to do. So great pleasure meeting all of you today. Thanks for taking the time investing in yourselves today during the summer. I look forward to take any questions that you might have. Thanks.
Yeah, and so we just got a question for you. So if you could suggest some literature for founders or people aspiring to work for a VC, which books would it be?
Thanks, great question. Depends on what aspect, but I think some of the books about the big success stories of the past years and decades are really inspiring, first of all, and I think how they started. One book that I read a few months back was The Power Law, talking about many of the companies that have succeeded. I think that's great. It's, I think, a summary of many startup companies. So I recommend The Power Law a lot. I think also The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Mr. Horvitz from A16Z is a great book. If you want to get more into the terms level and talking about venture terms, I think the book Venture Deals is great. I really like Steve Jobs' autobiography a few years back. I think that was great. The book about Elon Musk that came out recently, or a few years ago, actually, I think that was also helpful. Then I think podcasts are super instrumental, super great just to get inspired and to learn about some of the tricks of the trade, 20 VC, acquired podcasts, and so forth. Reach out if you have any more advice. I love myself to read more and to listen more, especially during the summer. So yeah.
Awesome. And at Antler, we've also published a list of great books to read for founders and investors on our website. So we created, check that out. And we have a list of podcasts too that we recommend that everyone checks out. Okay, thank you so much, Anders, for your time. Again, feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions for Anders. I'll pass it over to Magnus now, who'll talk a bit about the 5-slide challenge and the next steps for it and wrap up this event. Magnus, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Anders. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So, hey, thanks a lot, first of all, for joining our very first Antler Ignite. We're excited about taking this further, and you should, follow the Antler website or our social media, and you can get notified about new things that we do here. There was also a bunch of questions coming up while we're talking about students and high school students who want to build something, but they're busy with school. So are there kind of part-time Antler resources? And there are some online. We don't have a part-time program currently, but we'll hope to do more like this. You are the ones who are going to build the future and make civilization move forward. So we'd like to support you and the time when the time is right. To start off, we do actually have this 5-slide challenge. So anyone who'd like to join, this is almost like a small pitch competition. We're going to select a few winners, and the winners of this challenge will get some personal coaching time, and we'll also ensure that if you apply to be part of any of the Antler programs, you'll get the right attention in the interview process. It's pretty simple. It's meant to test your entrepreneurial spirit and critical thinking skills. It's basically creating 5 slides outlining the problem, the target market, the proposed solution, the business model, and the team. Mostly you if you're currently building it alone. We have a template that you can use. Perhaps Yash, you want to share all of these links in the chat. We'll also share it after the call. We'll send out a quick email to everyone. We do encourage people to be creative, concise, and thorough in the creation of the deck. And I already mentioned what we do with the winners. These are the submission guidelines. So the template is there. You can find it on our website as well. You submit the presentation in PDF format. The deadline is next Sunday, the 6th of August, and we'll announce the winners on the Antler website and over social media on Monday, the 14th of August. Obviously, we'll reach out to you prior to that. And if you have more questions, or if you want to be more involved, then just send an email to ignite@antler.co. Perhaps again, you just share that in the chat. Yash. There was also the last question to Anders there around resources. If you search on Google and you search for book recommendations Antler, or if you go on our website and scroll down on the blog section, you can actually see both our 2023 and 2022 book recommendation list for founders and VCs. It's a great list of books you can find there. We also have many podcast recommendations. There you can find that in the same place. So literally, I can just show you how it looks like here. You just click in, and it's on our blog. So pretty straightforward. And hope you take the time to read some of these books, take the time to listen to some of these podcasts. There's a lot of learnings of people who built things before, and it's a great way to get inspiration, learn, and build on the shoulders of giants. If you want to follow Antler, obviously our website, antler.co. We're on Twitter, or now rebranded X, @Antler Global. We're at LinkedIn. You can find Antler there. At Instagram, we're @Antler Global. And on YouTube, we're also Antler Global. So if you follow those channels, you will get kind of information on the latest resources that we have, and hopefully other follow-up workshops like this and any type of other support we can give you. If you're ready to build something, full-time, we do run these full-time programs, so you can apply to antler.co. With that, thanks a lot for joining us. Very excited to see so many people join, excited to hopefully support a number of you in changing the world over the next decades. It's the most exciting thing in the world to go out there, solve a big problem. And everyone you heard here today, Rajiv, Lavanya, Anders, myself, Yash, and about 300 other people in Antler across the globe, the only thing we think about every day is making great founders very successful. So we're there to support you. And we're also very happy to have Tejas come and share a little bit of his journey as a teenage founder. And we're very excited to invest in him and support him. So with that, thanks for joining. And you can now call yourself founding members of Antler Ignite as being part of the very first workshop that we had. So thank you very much. Take care.